thank you very much for joining, everyone for joining this webinar. So basically, as Mishkin mentioned, I'm one of the senior consultants. I have been doing training and consulting for some of the 500 Fortune companies and many other companies, different places, different industries, and that's been for a while. So that's interesting, especially because coming here to present this topic of the problem solving, it's one of the most common issues of the organizations, not only the problems itself, but also which methodology they use to. And over those 15 years as a consultant, I've explored many different techniques. We evolved with different teams and find out the best approaches to solve those problems. And that's what I want to bring here into the discussion. It's not only for what is the methodology itself that can be focused if there is any question, but more in how we choose, how we explore, how we see those possibilities in more than a strategic and tactical level. So as I started, there you go, and I'm part of BERTEIG Consulting, and besides a consultant, I like saying that I'm a problem solver. And it's interesting in a personal level, if you were seeking for a new opportunity or work, in an interview, they are gonna ask you if you have experience in a problem solving environment. And it's interesting because sometimes there's a request for a specific methodology or approach, but mainly they want to know if you know how to solve issues or those things that bring some discomfort. And I like to see myself as one of those people, who transform what is expected and what is desired and deliver some result to the organization. Anyway, so our agenda for today is here. We're going to talk about expectation versus reality and understand what is a problem. So, because some people would say, oh, this is not a problem, but some others, they would say, yes, it's an opportunity here. So we're going to talk about that. Some of the challenges in a problem-solving environment, and some of the anxiety, especially when we talk about the executive expectation, so why that happened. You probably have heard before, let's welcome problems, but there's a paradox in there, and we are going to talk about it. Some of the most common frameworks, and potentially here, I won't bring all of them, but I'll bring some so we can talk about them. Different types of problems and strategies that we can use. The top 7 skills that you should have if you want to be a problem solver, and what are the most important questions to start this journey. So whatever you are, whichever is the company that you are in, what are the most important questions that you should ask yourselves. Anyway, so that's our agenda for this webinar. And I want to start here with a metaphor. It's basically the process and how companies work. So it doesn't matter if you work in the service industry, doesn't matter if you are in a manufacturing company, but you want to transform some inputs in a specific output. It can be tangible, it can be intangible. Sometimes you are using data and you're transforming that into information. But the idea is that we are transforming ideas and expectations into some products and services. And that's the expectation. So I really liked one example that Mishkin, that is here with us, shared in one of the classes. So if you are doing some mistakes, what do you have to do to solve them? So basically stop doing those mistakes or those problems in the environment, but that's not clear to everyone. So if first we have to know what we are doing in any process, and not only to understand the product itself or the service, but have to know the process as well. But in the reality, sometimes the process is not the best as we thought that it would be. So it's quite chaotic. There's urgency, there's chaos, there's priorities, conflicts, and we work in an undesirable situation, and that unfortunately does not help in produce or achieving this kind of result. And the other way of seeing that is that we produce a lot of mistakes, failures, issues, or whatever you want to call. And that can be measured. And it's important to understand that first you have to measure what is that problem. Do you have a perfect process in place? Are you producing whatever you want to produce, or are you transforming that information whatever you want? If you don't know how much waste, or it can be time, can be money, can be customer dissatisfaction, you won't be able to improve that as well. So my first recommendation is let's measure reality, what's currently going on. Of course, we would love to have a perfect process in place, but sometimes there's a broken process and we have to assess that. So if you're taking notes, or if you're mentally want to remember something, the first step it would be know what are the problems, know what are the failures that you have in your process. Do not hide from your peers or your bosses. It's important to be aware of that. If you just ignore, over the time you're gonna say, oh, that's normal, that's okay, we can live with that. And that thing that was bothering you in the beginning, now it's normal. And that potentially over time will increase. So remember, it's undesired. It's not normal. Maybe it's common because of the reality, but let's do something to fix that. So that's the reality. Facing the reality is the first time. And if you understand that that is the reality, the most common reaction or the most common strategy is react to that problem. The idea of reacting is just, okay, let's fix this right away. And you probably have seen this in many organizations. There's a real sense of urgency or anxiety in not giving the problem to the consumer or developing that into a final solution. So you have to do something and you just react. But the problem is that if you do not fix that, or if you do not correct that problem, you're going to face that problem again and again and again. And at a point that your daily activity is going to be mostly trying to eliminate those mistakes and failures. And because you don't have a proper strategy to eliminate those things, you just react when those problems happen. And the most common thing, if to identify if you're in this situation, try to think how much time you spend on your day fixing problems rather than doing something useful or adding value to your process and business. So be aware of this. Not only we have to understand and acknowledge that there's a problem, but we also want to understand where we are just reacting. That's the first common strategy. The second common one is understand that temporary is not necessarily the best, but in some organizations, temporary fix become permanent fix. And that sometimes doesn't look right, okay? Of course, and the top one answer for why you weren't able to fix it permanently is because there's no time, there's no resource, and again, you get used to that, and you leave and say, okay, this looks odd in the first time, but after that, you're going to say, yeah, it's not that bad. We can live with that. But if that becomes a pattern, you're gonna follow this pattern for many other things. And what should be temporarily, it will become permanent. So be aware of that as well. Because when those things start happening once, twice, three times, as many times, and we do not focus only in how to eliminate those internal problems. We can have some unexpected situations, like we can have some recalls. And believe me, you don't want to have a recall and communicate to the market that there was a problem in your process. That affects your company, that affects your shareholders, that affects the consumer perception of what's going on. And we can see lots of examples, some of them preventive, or some of them because something really happened. There's lots of examples in the car industry, food, cell phone, and many others that we could share. So problems are common. We have to face them. It's expected, but we understand that they are not desired. And the important thing is, especially if you want to convince someone that we have to tackle those problems, is that if we do that before it goes to the market, it's going to be better than we do a recall or have to provide some compensation for the customer as well. So this sometimes is a good way to explain and convince someone, but okay, do you want to pay the price of a poor quality in your process? I don't think so. So with that, there you go. Okay, I need to remove this, and that's a problem. So let's see, clear, done. Okay, so there was a problem. We're going to talk about that. Anyway, let's go back to the presentation. And some of the challenges, right? So you could say, David, I know some skills. I know some methodologies. I've been trying to do that in my workplace, but there are some challenges. So the top 6 challenges that we see in organizations is basically there's no priority. What is urgent for you is not urgent for someone else, or it's not urgent or critical to your boss or whoever it is. But you say that the problem, there's a problem once, twice, and at some point, management becomes anxious for a quick fix. So that wasn't urgent 6 months ago, but now it's really urgent. And if you say, oh, this is going to take 2 months to fix it because we have to understand what is the problem, we understand the causes, and provide training, etc. They want it now, or they wanted it yesterday. And that's another problem, which takes us to the strategy number 1 and 2. You basically react and temporarily fix something because there is urgency. Another thing is you're going to try, or you have to try to solve something, but you have no knowledge for that or on how to do that. Another thing is people don't have time to participate or engage with you in a problem-solving project or a problem-solving initiative. And because of that, and the topic is related to different other areas, you have a poor participation, poor engagement, and guess what's going to happen? There won't be any change. Sometimes we just shortcut things. We just try to skip some steps or skip some phases, and basically that doesn't have that much. Or including planning and implementation, which is not perfect or well done. So there are some challenges, and like the problem for a specific process, there could be some problems with the methodologies or the mindset that you might have. And you, as an individual for the organization, you can challenge those assumptions. You can challenge, why is this a problem? Okay, we don't have resource, so what do we need to have resource? And there's anxiety for a quick fix. Okay, why can't we wait? So what can we do right now? And especially try to understand what is the system that you are in, and how the organization treat the problems, and how you solve them. If there's no systematic approach, or if it's not a proactive approach, maybe it's time to change. And here is the paradox, right? Because at the same time, we want to solve problems, or in a better way, we want a perfect process, which means we want no problems at all. But at the same time, when we have a problem, we don't put energy to understand why that happens, and we do not put sufficient energy to eliminate that problem forever. So we don't want it, but at the same time, we accept the fact that the problems are in our process. And that's a problem in every organization, because over the time, you're going to see critical things like they are going to try changing people or buying new equipments with the expectation that that will magically solve everything. Let's now hire a superhero who's going to magically come with a specific policy, and that will solve everything. It won't. So what is the culture that your organization has in terms of problem solving? If you say that has been working well, you're happy with the currently results, it's okay, just keep it. But if you're not happy and there's more problems, or you're firefighting every single day, it's time to change. So how do we do that? There are some, if you evaluate lots of methodologies and different frameworks, there are 3 common steps. So they are very simple, and that's the first step to explain to whoever it is, or whoever is able to help in problem solving. So the first part is assess the problem. It's not the idea of just offering a solution. You have to understand what the problem is, so that we can offer the right remedy to eliminate, not just contain the problem. The second part, once we understand what's going on, even the problem, if it's in the market, in the manufacturing, sales, commercial, finance, human resource, there are potentials, opportunities, and gaps everywhere. You have to define the best framework. It's not one framework fits all. Of course not. There are different frameworks with different purposes, and the more you learn, the more you're going to understand what are the differences between them. Of course, if you know just one method, like PDCA, or we're going to talk more about others, but you can use that one with a starting point. But keep learning and keep understanding. Keep going to webinar courses, or get information, because that will enhance the way you tackle problems. So once you know the best tool to solve the problem, it's time to implement and validate the results. If you skip one of those, I certainly can guarantee that you're gonna live with the problem for more time than you were expecting. So remember to understand what was the undesired thing, define the best remedy, implement that properly, and validate the results. There's one more element, which is control and monitor over time, but that's part of the process itself as well. So if there's something wrong, make sure that you identify that well and validate the end results. All of other methodologies, they have these common steps with different names, different steps, different phases, etc. And some of the methodologies that I brought here, it was basically some of the frameworks that we can see. So for example, there's the 3C, which is a very basic one, and I just created this scale from 1 to 8 for related to methodologies that you can use for more complex problems and for simpler problems and complex ones. So 3C is a very simple one, which basically stands for concern, cause, and countermeasure. And the idea of here is that you understand the problem, you understand the cause, you not just define a countermeasure for the problem itself, but you understand the source of the problem, because you are going to either contain the problem, block the problem, or tackle the cause that is creating that. So if you are sick, you want to know if that is a fungus or a bacteria or something else. You want to know the cause so you can focus on what is important. You're not just going to take an aspirin and try to contain the problem. If you do that, maybe it's going to solve the problem right away, but maybe you're going to face the problem again and again. And that's for processes as well. So if it's something simple, you don't have to use fancy methodologies. You just create simple ones. Okay. Another common example, it's not properly a framework, but it was important to bring. It is a moment that you have in with Scrum teams or some Agile environment, which is the sprint retrospective. And in that retrospective, you can use many different techniques to tackle some specific problems, including conversations, brainstorming, 5 whys, fishbone analysis, use many other tools to help you identify the items that we mentioned before, to assess the problem, identify the opportunities, and find a solution for that. So it's important having these conversations within the group and within the organization as well. Another one is the A3 problem-solving template, which was used originally in Toyota, but became widely known as a very simple, straightforward way of solving problems. And again, you follow the same structure that I mentioned in the slide before, which starts from the problem until you solve the problem itself. And the idea of the A3, which I really like, it's basically one paper and you put all the information there. You do not spend much time on analysis or focusing on complexity. But of course, that brings a limitation that this kind of methodologies for simpler problems or a little complicated ones. Another one, which I'd like to say, is the Deming cycle, which stands, the PDCA, which stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. And the idea is that, again, you start from a problem and you evaluate the sustainability. But here in this toolbox, you have many other tools and techniques which are integrated and connect so that you can eliminate and tackle more complicated problems. Okay. If you need some more advanced methodology, there's the make and the demand approach. The make, it's an evolution of the DCA, and there are more steps, and you can use more statistical tool for more complicated and some complex problems as well. But if fixing the problem is not what you are looking for, maybe it's time for design something new. If the process or the product is broken, it's time to redesign or rethink how you are doing what you are doing. And then you can have the demand, and design thinking, and trust, which are methodologies mainly focused on what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, so we can explore what we currently have, or if you don't have anything, you can start from scratch, but focusing on all possibilities and how to reduce the problems as well. So demand is one of the 5 steps. Design thinking, there are people claim with different steps, but it's basically the same thing. You transform an idea into a product or a service, focusing on a marketing acceptance as well. And one for complex problems as well, or complicated and complex, is a trust. And basically, it's an interesting approach because we understand that the problem or a harm is part of a daily environment. And we would like to understand those contradictions and those challenges so we can come up with an innovative solution. So there are many others. So this is the idea was to quickly explain how you can learn about some tool and understand its properties. And I'm going to share some other properties in the next slide, but you can focus on the problem that you have using the right tool or the right framework, okay? Important. The first one here, for example, 3C, won't solve all the problems. You might try, but over the time, you're going to see that something more is needed because the methodology itself wasn't able to help or solve everything. At the same time, trace or design thinking maybe is too much to solve simple problems. And sometimes you know how to solve the problem, you know what to do, so just do it, okay? Anyway, here's a quick explanation. So from 1 to 8, it's important to be aware of 3 things, especially if you were talking with the executives. Please be aware if the methodology that you are using, it mainly focuses, there are some overlapping here. It's not black and white as I had to put in here, but make sure that what you are doing or what you're using helps you to solve the problem. So if you have some special events, something that happened once in a while and it's not recurrent, you can use the first 3 of them. They will fit very well. But if you have recurrent problems, do not just react. Use something that is robust enough to respond to your need. So it is okay to try to contain the problem, but be aware if you have to do that again and again and again. If you're doing nothing and you are experiencing that situation, that's a waste of your knowledge and a waste of your opportunity. So use the proper methodology to solve those problems forever, okay? Another thing is, are you looking for sustainable actions and changes? So if you're not looking, just want to contain the problem right away, the 3C is sufficient. But if you're looking for something sustainable over time, and if the methodology is used properly, there's no shortcut, you can use those methodologies from the sprint retrospectives to TRIS to trigger sustainable actions over time. And that said, if you experience something today, you won't experience that after. But remember, one of the challenges is to skip some steps, and you don't want that. And the other part, which can be useful to convince some executives, is the financial impact that you have to resolve. So let's say there is a huge loss or a small amount, and we cannot really quantify and say 1,000, a million, $100 million. But for small opportunities, very operational level, you can use the first methodology here from 1 to 4. But if there's more tactical or strategic level and you want to tackle those huge opportunities, you might consider from 5 to 8, which is to make thematic design thinking trees and others. Okay, again, not limited to those 8. So be aware to understand what are the opportunities in terms, is this a recurrent problem? Do I want to create a sustainable improvement over time? And what is the financial impact that I'm bringing to the organization? Because not only choosing the right methodology, we have also to understand that there are problems everywhere. There are problems in the execution. There are problems related to the resources. There are problems related to the skills. And you cannot just rely and expect that your employees are going to solve everything or that they are the source of the problem. They're partially responsible for one part, which is mainly the execution. But how you design the system, how you define the strategy. If you want something from yesterday, the policies that you define in at the top, they're gonna impact significantly how you execute things. So some of the sources are going to be related with the policies that you put in place. Some of the problems are going to be related with the priorities that you communicate or that you not communicate to the people. So independently of which level you are in, understand there's opportunities below and above. And if you do changes in the strategic level, understand that the impact is larger than the impact in the tactical one, or the effort in the top is less, consider the effort that people might have to do in the tactical level. But another thing that is complicated is that down here at the bottom, it's more tangible. You can see, you have most of the times metrics for those things and the issues. As in a strategic level, you don't have those metrics or you cannot see. But the way you put a system, the way you create the process, it's important and will affect everything. And if you have seen this before, there's different types of problems. So I mentioned this is the Knaving diagram, and which basically helps us to understand different environments, different scenarios. And for this presentation's sake, I would focus on different kinds of problems. There are some problems that you already know how to do it. They are obvious, they are simple, they are straightforward. You have a recipe. If the result is not A, it's going B. You just have to adjust some settings and do something different. Just follow the procedure. You're going to be good. That's the obvious one. Some others you not necessarily know, but there's a very simple and cause-effect relation, which if you use some of the tools and methodologies, like the ones that we mentioned, A3, the PDCA, or the MAKE, you can solve those cause and effect relations. Yeah. So if it's not clear what to do right away, and if you need some analysis, maybe it's in the complicated environment, and you can use the tools that I mentioned here, 3 to 5. But if the correlation is not clear, if it's a complex environment, you don't really know what is causing that problem. Usually, the way to identify this is how much time you need to respond to something. If I come back a little bit, the obvious is you know the response right away. The complicated, you need some time to think about it, but do some investigation, but you're going to get a response. In a complex, you need much more time to investigate, do some analysis, and experiment. And that works greatly the Madven design thinking one. But if you do have a chaotic environment, you have no idea what's going on, there's, in my list at least, there's no perfect tool for that yet. Maybe you can come up with something, put it in the comments. But the TREZ is something interesting that you can explore some possibilities and contradictions. And of course, experiment and create some offers to resolve that. So with all of those tools, now once you identify what is important for the business and which environment they are in, it's time to understand what is the foundation for all of that. So it doesn't matter which one you're going to have. Those here are the top 7 problem-solving skills, which are really, really important in any of those cases. Active listening, analytical thinking, creative thinking, communication, reliability, dependability, decision-making, and team building, all of them are great for an environment that you are trying to improve. So if it's interesting, if we talk about the engagements that we go, most of the times you're going to find some of them, if not all of them, in place. And the problem is not necessarily with the framework that they are using, but it's related more to the communication. Or something like they cannot decide what they are going to implement, or they are not able to organize and come up with a solution. So it's important to be aware of the most important things. And we could say, but David, they are not necessarily technical skills, but soft skills. Yes, they are really important also if you want to become a better problem solver. And the question that I give to you here is, how have you been improving your problem solving skills? So have you been great active listener? Have you been learning more and more things? How have you been improving your communication and the other ones as well? You can definitely leverage your current knowledge if you become aware, or if you pay more attention on those facts in here. Okay. And my last slide is to basically leave you guys with these 5 key questions for you to revisit your journey or start your journey, wherever you are. So if you have a no for any of these questions, please consider an improvement for you. So are you preventing future problems, or are you just focusing the currently ones that you have? Are you just reacting as we saw before? Or you could say, but David, we don't have time for that. We are too busy. That's the cycle that we want to break. So if you are too busy now, what's going to happen when you face a new problem in your environment? Are you going to say to your client, yeah, let's just pretend that there's no problem. You pay me the product and we are okay. Usually it does not work like that, unless you're in monopoly, but that's another story. So how you're preventing future problems, how you are tackling those things, how you're doing. Another tip here is allocate some time in your day to work on those problem solvings and ask yourselves how you not just contain the problem itself, but how you also correct and eliminate that problem definitely. How can you make yourself, how can you live without that? How can you avoid that? It's sometimes just simple. It's just have to engage other people and come up with different ideas and say, how can we avoid this? That's it. Anyway, if you get to a level, which is rare, but if you get to a point that you could say, David, we don't have any problem, so perfect. You're in a different level, and I would say, what can you do beyond of your current state? Because if you're in that point, keep going, keep improving, and maybe you're gonna have a better product, and even better a service to your customer. Anyway, so the next one is, are actions definitely eliminating problems, or are you just containing and temporarily fixing? Okay. Contain the problem, it's important, but it's not sufficient. Remember that. For the executives, especially the most anxious one, and they are not anxious because they are just anxious. They are anxious because they are concerned of receiving a fine of the client. They are concerned with some regulatory things. Remember that you can contain, but do not stop there. Contain the problem and create a task group or a task force to correct and eliminate the problem so that you won't face that again and again, especially if you are in a repetitive process or business. If you do that once, twice, 3 times. Do not just ignore, because those problems are tough sometimes to eliminate. So involve as many people as you want. Even areas that they are not necessarily or directly related, they start becoming aware of what's going on and why is that important to the customer. Which basically takes us to the third item, which is, can everyone identify gaps and opportunities? The answer usually is no. Not everyone is aware of what's going on, especially huge organizations that people are in their silos and sometimes they have no idea what is value to the customer. So once you start those conversations, meetings, and explain that something is not relevant or that's creating harm, you're gonna enhance their ability to identify what is a gap and opportunity to tackle. Maybe it's not a problem to the customer's perspective, but maybe it's costing time, delay, stress in the organization, so you can focus that on. And the other part is, are you alone in this journey, or all the organizational levels are involved in this? Are they all supportive or not? So believe me, I haven't seen any organization that wants problem, that wants to spend money with crap. So if you if not everyone is on board, maybe it's a matter of changing the language. Talk to them, understand what is important, priorities, and not only focus on the short-term benefits, but also in the long term as well. And the final, and I'd say the most important one, which can help with the others, is how you are continually learning new problem solving methods. So, have you learned something in the past and stopped there? Maybe that worked very well for the problems that you faced before, but there's new technology, there's new environment, uh, the economic environment now is different. The marketplace is different as well. So it's time to use and see what are the other tools, frameworks, possibilities, and ideas that they are available. There's lots of webinars, presentation, uh, articles in the web. So keep learning, keep exploring, keep asking, talking, and keep evolving individually and improving your organization. Okay, that's a quick start that I want to give you as a summary of the presentation. Okay, Mishkin, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. That was very good. And we currently don't have any open questions. So now is the time if you'd like more detail, for example, about some of the methods that David shared, or if you have any questions about understanding any of it, just as a note, of course, we will be posting the recording of this and notifying everyone when it's available, as well as the slide deck itself. So please don't worry about that. And I guess I'll just mention that you know, David's background is sort of influenced by Lean Six Sigma as well, and so the connection with the Agile approaches has been really beneficial for his work with our clients. And perhaps there'd be an opportunity for maybe David to share, you know, like an anecdote or a story that relates to those things if it comes up in the questions. So I'll give people a few moments to, if they have questions, to write them down. And of course, if you don't, we can wrap up soon, since we are getting close to 1 o'clock. David, so do you have any sort of stories that you can share about maybe some of your recent work?
Yeah, let me share one, and this is an interesting environment. So this is a pretty fresh story, I'd say. So we were hired to help a company. They wanted to increase their agility, and by increase their agility, they want to develop a software very quickly. So, or quicker than before. So I won't be able to disclose any names, but let's stay with that. And I'd say it's a huge company. So right in the beginning, doing some assessments and trying to understand what was the at that time, I came up with I had the opportunity to evaluate the contracts, etc. And they didn't have the ability to develop the application by themselves, so they have to hire a supplier. So RFPs, etc. Long story short, they took approximately 9 months to create an RFP share that with potential suppliers, select a supplier, and sign the contract. So 9 months just to put in a paper what they thought they would need and to communicate to potential suppliers. I understand, it's normal, it's a process, etc. It turns out that the supplier that won the bid, they claim to be Agile, they claim to use Scrum, but it was a very waterfall heavy approach at the end. And an application based on my experience and talking to some other consultants as well, an application that could be developed in 3 months, it took 18 months to develop. And the reason is that they were following the process, they were following some recommendations, but the policies and the constraints that they put and they had to follow in the contract, it was limiting their execution. And every time they would try something new, disruptive to that contract, some other department would say, oh, you're not following the contract, therefore we won't pay you. So the challenge itself, it wasn't in the execution, but it was how they set the stage. And was the application successful? Yes, but it took 1.5 years to have it. And in retrospective, using what we mentioned here, they understood that because they weren't able to change every process, that would be their baseline. And until they get to a point that they can change the way they do things internally, they won't be able to achieve the agility that they were aiming for. So in conclusion is, sometimes you can follow the best approaches, but if the stage is not set properly, or if the environment, if there's lots of constraints in the environment, you're gonna have to work on the upper levels of the organization as well, and that won't be as quick as you would like to. Okay, it was a very interesting project.
Thanks, David. So people are kind of gradually dropping away, and again, we don't have any further questions at this time. So I think what I'd like to do is just thank you very much, David. And, you know, as I mentioned, we'll post the video on this. It will take a little bit of editing, but we'll get it out hopefully sometime next week. And everyone will be notified once it has been posted. If you're interested, David is easily accessible. If you would like him to help you with problem-solving techniques, either individually or in your team or organization, of course, please feel free to reach out to us at BERTEIG.com, and we will see what we can do to help out. All right, and with that, I think we're done. Another Real Agility Series webinar. Thank you all so much.